Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me on In His Will. My name's Debbie Birdsmith, and tonight we have another episode of the book Son of My Will, and we're in chapter 4 of the book A New Life. And so I hope you grab your beverage and your cozy blanket or whatever you need, and we'll get to reading here because I love all your comments. I've been reading all of your comments about going through this, and it's really kind of a great way to get an understanding and a feel for the times that Luisa lived, for the atmosphere, politically and liturgically, the church, where the church was at this time, and what was going on, and honestly, that just she suffered so much. Luisa suffered so many things to be able to um, commune with Jesus, to have these times with Jesus, and to lie with what he asked of her. And he asked a lot. She suffered a tremendous amount. So before we begin, I'd like to ask you if you have, and then you're going to know every time that we do episode, another and I'd like to hear to our understanding of the divine will that come from these, great writers, Dan O'Connor particularly. And I think it's helpful some catatonic state where she would be rigid. She would become like stone. People couldn't move her. She was like in a comatose state. It was like she was dead, and nobody could bring her out of it. Her parents took her to doctors. And the doctors finally said, you need to take her to a priest. This is, I think they could see that it was supernatural, that it wasn't something that was a physical malady that they could really tap into. And sure enough, that's what happened, is a priest would come and touch Luisa, and she would come out of it. And so, and some of the times the priests really made her suffer because they would leave her in that state for a long time, thinking that she was just seeking attention, or she was, crazy. Something was going on. So a lot of suffering took place, a lot of big, strange kinds of episodes and things were happening, and made people question about what is going on with this woman. And so in this next section, I should say, not the next chapter, we're still in chapter 4. The heading on this one, and this is on page 46, if you're in the little green book here. Eating becomes impossible. We said that when Luisa regains consciousness, she returns to normal. Well, that's not exactly right. She returns to normal in that she can move again, but what lingers is a strong revulsion for any kind of food. If sometimes she eats something when forced by a family member, she brings it all back up again just a few minutes later. This, too, is seen as a form of mischief on her part, so that both her family and other people are after her, scolding her. And yet they should be noticing that something unusual is happening. The food she brings back up is whole, fresh, and fragrant. So they think that she's doing it herself, that it's some kind of bulimic episode where she's forcing herself to vomit. That's not the case. The food is coming up just exactly as it went in her mouth. And it's very fresh. It's not chewed up. It's not in any way disgusting. It's not... It smells fresh. It smells good. It smells like it did when it was laying on her plate. It says, but the people around her seem to have a kind of spiritual blindness. They're not able to take a leap into seeing something miraculous. On the contrary, they keep looking for earthly cures. The priest, in fact, gets the idea of making her take quinine, which is used to stimulate the appetite. At the same time, he obligates her to eat every time she vomits. So Louisa eats, but she has continual bouts of vomiting. She brings it all back up and is left feeling the same hunger as before. Indeed, she's even hungrier than before because of the medicine she took. What is happening? She feels the pangs of hunger. She's afraid to ask for food, and she wonders, what will my family say? She threw up, just a little while ago, and now she wants to eat again. She became determined to bear with the hunger, and if they give her something, she'll take it. Otherwise, it's up to the Lord. So the priest is forcing her to eat. The priest is still, thinking, he's ordering her to eat. He obligates her to eat every time she vomits. So every time she does this, he puts it right back down her throat. He makes her eat again, and it comes up again. And every time she eats, she's left hungrier than before, besides the fact that they're giving her quinine, which is making her quite hungry. It doesn't say that she didn't experience hunger. It says she couldn't keep the food down. What is suffering? About 4 months go by. 4 months. One day the Lord tells her to ask the priest for permission not to take the quinine anymore and not to make her eat after she is thrown up. When her confessor arrives, she makes her request with very little hope, but then he orders her to eat just once a day and to stop taking quinine. Luisa thinks that the problem has been solved, but when she eats just that one time a day, she still brings it all back up. And the food is always fragrant. Once more, the priest does not understand, and he tells her to accept this mortification as well. Luisa also confesses to him that the Lord sometimes tells her to ask for permission not to eat anything, but her confessor will not allow it. At first, she brings her food back up 3 or 4 days, but after a while it happens, brings her food back up every 3 or 4 days, but after a while it happens every time she eats. Yet as the years go by, it is no longer always like this. The reason, Jesus explains to her, lies in the fact that after having purified and detached the creature from earthly things, he brings her back to ordinary life because he wants his children to take part in the things he created for them. So for some reason, Jesus wanted to detach Luisa from food, from eating, from the pleasure of food, because this was a great mortification for her. Not only was it inconvenient, not only did it leave her hungry, but it was mortifying. People questioned her every motive for everything she did, and were, as it says, were blinded to the spiritual implications of this, because they thought that she was seeking attention, or something was wrong with her, or they just didn't know. But then it goes on to say that Jesus explains to her that he purified her from her detachment to food, and she knew she could live with food or without food. Then he wanted her to go ahead and enjoy one of the things that he's created for us, which is food, and for her to enjoy it. So she didn't vomit anymore. A voluntary victim for the reparation of the sins of mankind. So we're going to read here about this victimhood. Luisa was truly a victim soul. She suffered for others' salvation. She suffered for others' sins. She was truly a victim soul. And in 1887, Luisa's mission as victim gets fully underway. The profound union with Jesus will receive further public demonstration. Her participation in the suffering of the Passion is also participation in the Passion's aim, the salvation of all humanity. Love for Jesus leads, as a natural consequence, to a love for all creatures for whom Jesus offered himself to the Father. Luisa is engaged in this dynamic of offering oneself in full union with Christ. The ablative and unitive dimensions are deeply connected. One is made explicit in the other. For this reason, while Jesus asks her to offer herself voluntarily as victim in reparation for the sins of mankind, at the same time, he announces to her his plan for his mystical marriage, as will be seen. For the reason for the occasion stems from the war in Africa. Sparked by Italy's colonist aims, Jesus announces the imminent upsurge that will see great bloodshed. He affirms us in his way to chastise mankind's ingratitude for his great love. So at the time, there was a war going on in Africa because of the colonial system that had been set up there. Many, many lives were lost. It was a bitter battle. And so there was an upsurge in the bloodshed. There was an upsurge in the war. Luisa becomes aware of two loves inside her that are at odds with each other. On the one hand, she feels her heart breaking from the pain suffered for the offenses made against Jesus. At the same time, she feels sorry for people who must be punished. It would be easier for her to bear if she could take on all those punishments herself, rather than to see others suffer. Her heart is soothed only when she finds the strength to offer her life in sacrifice to Jesus in order to see the people who are his own images spared. So here we have the great dilemma of Luisa's life, and we read this all through the writings. Jesus suffers because of our sins. She sees the suffering in the world. She sees how Jesus is unhappy because of this rejection of the people. And she wants to alleviate his suffering. She wants to alleviate all the suffering of all the people. And Jesus says, no, you can't do that, Luisa. Suffering is necessary. They have to learn. They have to give themselves to me. And you're always interfering. I can't tell you no. How many times do we read this? I can't tell you no. So every time you ask me to alleviate this suffering, to stop it, to not chastise the people, you're stopping me from making progress in converting the world. So I have to go away from you. I have to stay away from you because I know what you're going to ask me. I know what you're going to want me to do. And if I stay away, I won't feel compelled to do it. I'll be able to do my work. And you need to understand this is important and it's necessary. Well, the Lord's response was not long in coming. What he asks of her will impact the rest of Luisa's earthly life, that she be continuously bedridden. In fact, if she accepts offering herself by suffering and staying in bed, not every now and then as she had been up until now, but every day, for a certain given amount of time, Jesus will spare humanity from atrocious sufferings. Putting herself in the middle between divine justice and the wickedness of creatures, Luisa will spare mankind by taking upon herself the just punishments they deserve. At the same time, these constant sufferings will benefit not only all creatures, but also Luisa herself, who, with her well-purified soul, will be ready to celebrate with Jesus a mystical marriage. This new union will further transform her soul in such a way as to become one with Jesus, like two candles placed in the fire. Jesus will transform himself in Luisa, and she will be crucified in Jesus. Only in this way would Luisa not remain different from Jesus in any way. The plan is now clear. The thing that Luisa gets wrong, however, is what is meant by for a certain given amount of time. She thinks it will come to about 40 days, while in actuality, Jesus intends it for the rest of her life. She will confess later that if she had understood the Lord's intention from the beginning, her consent would have been unlikely. The problem now remaining to be solved, however, is with her confessor. He needs to know about it and permit the suffering. Luisa does not miss the chance to ask to be excused from this onerous obligation. If it is difficult to get the confessor to come every now and then, how will he accept coming every day? Jesus does not give in, and he sends her to her confessor again. Unexpectedly, however, after listening to the proposal that she suffer continuously for 40 days, he consents and explains that his reluctance in the coming every day was due only to a bit of human respect. So Louise is saying, if I had known that he was going to do this to me for the rest of my life, I don't think I would have had it in me to consent. But for some reason, she thought that it was only going to, when he said for a certain amount of time, she thought that it was for a specific block of time. Well, it was for a specific block of time, but she didn't realize that that block of time was the rest of her life. She would be bedridden. In the second half of November 1887, Louisa, struck by her usual stupor, lies down in bed. She is 22 years old. Jesus also gives her the rules for a new way of life that prepares her for the promised mystical marriage. Now that she is in bed all the time, there is nothing else for her to do than to be in a continual holocaust, so that Jesus' afflictions and consolations are hers, while Jesus will take care of her and her needs. He asks her for perfect conformity to his will and to imitate his poverty, meaning that one be subject to the will of others without expressing one's own desires. So he's saying, give it up. Give up your desires. Give up your own will. Give up your own comforts, anything that you would ask for. You're expressing my desires now, only mine. In the meantime, the 40 days go by, and her confessor, who's very busy, would rather not have to go to her house every day to wake her from her usual state. I think this is very important that we understand this, because this usual state is mentioned so often in the writings. She says, I find myself in my usual state. What is that usual state? This is the state of being in this other realm, in this otherworldly state of being what appears to the world to be comatose, to be statutory, to be hard as a rock, unable to move or talk. Only through the touch of a priest can she come back to life. But this is when Jesus is taking her soul. She says, I come out of myself. In all the writings we hear, I came out of myself. This is what she's doing. Her soul isn't in her body. Her soul is with Jesus. He's teaching her. He's taking her all kinds of places, showing her all kinds of things. Therefore, he gives her the obedience of not going into that state anymore. But the Lord has other plans. The confessor says, you don't have to do that anymore. Don't go in that state anymore. The Lord says, wait a minute. On her part, even if she's feeling ready to obey, the order, Luisa wants to free herself from being constantly in bed, which no matter how nice it is, it's still a bed. She especially suffers having to subject herself to everybody for everything she needs. Think about that. She couldn't get out of bed. Everything she needed to bathe, to relieve herself, to change her clothes, to do anything. She had to depend on others. God bless her sister, Angela, who took care of her. God provided for her, but still, she said, no matter how nice it was a nice bed, but it's still a bed. Now let us turn to an episode that is even more striking and is needed for the Lord to have his plan take hold in Luisa. It's January the 1st, 1888. One night, Luisa asks the Lord, who comes to be with her, not to come. For a few hours, the Lord does not come, as he does every night, to clinch her to him in a grip of pain. Then morning comes, and Luisa loses consciousness and finds herself together with Jesus, so close that she cannot move away from him. She's sad about what she asked Jesus, but he understands that Luisa is obedient to her confessor, and he does not consider it to be an offense. Rather, he promises her a gift because it is New Year's Day. That morning, he draws his pure lips close to hers to pour forth a very sweet milk. After kissing her, he shows her a ring that he takes from inside his rib cage and that he has prepared for the day of marriage with Luisa. Then he tells her to tell her confessor that it is his will that she continue to be in bed. If the priest grants Luisa the obedience of continuing to offer her sufferings by staying in bed, he will give an unmistakable sign of his presence. He foretells, in fact, that the war underway between Italy and some African countries will end peacefully with nothing coming out of it for either side. So now this conflict that he actually exacerbated, he says, well, I'll end this war. If you will come, if you allow Luisa to stay in this state, I'll end this war in Africa. When her confessor arrives, he begins as usual to get aggravated and to threaten Luisa. She lets him talk, and when he's done, she tells him everything the Lord said. So he lets her continue the suffering as they wait to verify the outcome of the conflict. So the confessor says, okay, well, let's see what happens. Let's see if the Lord keeps his promise. Something that should be highlighted in this encounter that Luisa recalls is that it reflects her deepest being. She refers to the threats being made by her confessor. She could stop them immediately with the strength of Jesus' word, but she speaks only after he has the last word. What comes to mind is Jesus' silence before the soldiers' insults in the palace of Pontius Pilate and during the phase of a trial before Caiaphas, the other high priest. Luisa is now on the same path. Just as Jesus had to obey the authority in front of him at the time, he didn't argue, he didn't fight back, he didn't call God down to destroy them all. He complied. There's no resistance. And in the same way, Luisa is offering no resistance to her confessor. She's laying it out the way Jesus tells her. She's taking it as it comes. A great lesson for all of us, I think. After about 4 months, her confessor, Father Michel, comes one day and tells her that the war between North Africa and Italy is over. It should be noted that Corrado lies outside all the major channels of communication, and so national news is often delayed in getting there. We do not know what the priest thinks when he sees that what he was told 4 months ago turned out to be true. His skepticism, in any case, begins to waver from that moment on. Father Michel does not scold her as much. Rather, he agrees to come more often to bless her. It is 1888, and this priest will accompany her for 10 years. In fact, it seems that in 1894, he may have been assigned by the new Archbishop Domenico Marin, Marin, Marinangeli, to be her official confessor in order to study the case up close. In light of what he sees, Father Michel must be convinced that this is a work of God and that it is not Luisa being capricious. She's just a small, poor, ignorant woman, young woman, wrapped up in a great mystery. So after 10 years of being confessor to Luisa, to seeing to her spiritual needs, saying Mass in her room every day, he's been assigned to be her official confessor. They're studying the case up close. They see that something miraculous, that something extraordinary is happening in Corrado, and they want to know more about it. They're not thinking anymore that this is some kind of mental disorder or attention seeking or problem that Luisa has created. She's truly a victim's soul, and particularly with this ending of the war that Jesus promised. Yeah, they're really buying in now. Moral suffering. Added to Luisa's physical suffering is moral suffering as well. We've seen how she laments to Jesus about how their covenant of love must be revealed to a third party, the priest. Now, she's ashamed to be seen by people while the whole town is talking about her and what is going on with her. The Lord once more intervenes, reminding her that suffering serves as reparation of public sins and that he loves operating through his priests. He also explains to her why she must always be in bed. Luisa must be as good as dead to the world and must not see what is happening around her, so that he is able to operate freely within her at any moment, free from outside worries and family duties, and not being subjected to other kinds of spiritual and bodily sacrifices. Luisa can be in a continual holocaust. Every time he comes to visit her, Jesus will be more freely able to let her participate in the same offenses he received. He will not have to wait for Luisa to finish taking care of her responsibilities because since she's always free, nobody will bother her and interrupt their conversation and their being together. Given these explanations, there's nothing to say other than to repeat her fiat. Luisa has already tried and knows she can resist the Lord for a maximum of 3 days. Then if she wants to keep following him, she gives in. The Third Order Dominican. As we've seen, Luisa asked to join the Third Order of St. Dominic in 1882. A few years have passed since her noted vision of the suffering Christ, and she's asking herself how to better live out her response of love. Those belonging to the Third Order of St. Dominic are entrusted to the Corrado-born priest, Father Luigi Arbore, perhaps because the Church of St. Dominic is closed to worship due to the government's confiscation of church assets between 1866 and 1867, or perhaps because Father Luigi Arbore is rector of St. Mary the Greek Church at the time. The Third Order holds its gatherings and celebrations in St. Mary the Greek Church, at least until the Church of St. Dominic. For this reason, Luisa receives the scapular of the Dominican order in the crypt of St. Mary the Greek. Being a lay Dominican, thus she becomes a Dominican tertiary with the name of Sister Magdalena, and up until her final days, she will recite the divine office every day. She's very devoted to St. Dominic and St. Catherine, and she prepares for their feast days with a novena in their honor. Another reason she probably chooses the Third Order of St. Dominic can be seen in its devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary with their widespread devotion to the Holy Rosary. Luisa frequently asked Jesus if she will become a nun. Jesus answered yes. She'd entertained the idea of entering the Sisters of Charity of the Immaculate Conception of Ivrea, who had a presence in Corrado. She even took a look at the Poor Clare Monastery in nearby Trani. However, now being confined to bed perplexes her, and she thinks that Jesus has told her a lie. Jesus patiently explains to her he does not know how to deceive or make fun of anyone. In actuality, his calling for her was more special, to be the true little nun of his heart. To accomplish his plans, Jesus focuses on the substance of the soul, and the religious habit does not matter, just as the place makes absolutely no difference. He also points out that sometimes a religious institute lets the little world inside and they have a great deal of fun while Jesus is left by the wayside. That's the end of chapter 4. And oh my, what we learned in this chapter. Jesus said, okay, you can become a lay Dominican, but you're my little nun. You're my true little nun, the little nun of the divine will. It doesn't matter if you wear a habit. It doesn't really matter where you live. It's in the soul that your vocation lies. It's in the soul. With me is where the work is done. And besides, sometimes in the orders, they become more worldly than you, living in the world. But once again, these things that were happening in the world were not really given to Luisa. They weren't really in her immediate awareness. First of all, it wasn't the immediate awareness of Corrado, period, because Corrado was such a little town, kind of out. And we didn't have the media we have now. They had newspapers, but you didn't know things you didn't know about Africa until 4 months after it happened. So she was really very, very detached from the world. And Jesus arranged it that way. He wanted her detached. He wanted her to be in this basically comatose, dead to the world state, if you will, to be able to commune with her in her soul together, to teach her, to lead her, to give her all these messages, to prepare her for her great mission. There was the spiritual marriage. She's bedridden. She's got over her need for food. She still eats. But, doesn't matter. Completely surrendered. She kind of puts up with having to tell her confessor, and he's gaining understanding more and more as time goes on what is happening here. He's learning. But the people in the town, her own family, I'm sure there was gossip, there was questions. Some people are probably never going to believe that this is supernatural, that there's something else going on. But Luisa is obedient in all things. So I think this is a wonderful little section here. I would encourage you, if you're enjoying this, you may want to share this with other people in the divine will or other people who are interested in the divine will, because it sheds so much light on Luisa, her sacrifices, her holiness, her purification, because this is all of this is happening is purification of her soul. And Jesus tells us that this is what's going to happen with us. Our souls need to be purified. If you can, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Please hit the little like button. It's over here. It's over here. And if you want to become a member to support this channel, that would be really appreciated. We're in this together. I see this as a work that we all do together. It's not just me here. I have so many people who help me. Of course, we all know what a great contribution Dan Shields is, Mother Gabriel. Ron Ray appears sometimes. Derek Williams. I'm hoping soon we'll see Sam Kadori. I'm hoping to have Father Dominic on. This is a real labor of love, but it helps to have your support, and your support not only financially, if you can, with a little $5, $10, and you get a little extra for that. You'll get an extra video or some extra perks for that. But it's knowing that you're supporting this channel. It's knowing that you're supporting this work, because Jesus has called us all to this work. Just by offering our acts, by living in the divine will, we are in this work. It is our work. It becomes our work. By liking the videos, it pulls it up somehow in the algorithm. I'm technologically challenged, so I can't tell you a whole lot about it, but I do know that it pulls it up in the algorithm and people see it, and it appears as a suggested video more often the more people who like it. So liking it actually absolutely gets it out to more people. The same is true for comments. The more comments, the more it flows into the algorithm, the more likely it is to be suggested viewing for people who may not ever even see a Divine Will video. So knowing all that, we're in this together. I hope you enjoyed this little section. Next time we'll be on chapter 5. And the title of that chapter is The First Mystical Marriage. So we're going to get into this whole mystical marriage thing, and what does that mean, and what did that mean in terms of Louisa's life, how she lived her life, how she lived her everyday, day-to-day life, what it means to be in a mystical marriage with Jesus. They were united in soul, and so this will be another beautiful, beautiful chapter. Again, it's probably going to be in several installments because it's a fairly long chapter, and I'm trying to keep these rather brief so that people can absorb them and meditate on them, because really this book, everything in the Divine Will, is a meditation that we need to be doing. So with that in mind, I'm going to say thank you so much for joining us here on the channel, and to remember to always keep in His will. Bye-bye.